I'm Van Sebastian here with my co-host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge Season 10, Episode 23 interview. We'll be talking with Sven Davisson, that's right, a returning champion, discussing his book Puck You and diving into Rebel Satori Press's summer releases. So if you haven't heard one of his previous interviews, let me introduce him. Sven Davisson is the innovative force behind Rebel Satori Press, an independent publishing house dedicated to pushing boundaries and amplifying marginalized voices. With a keen eye for compelling narratives and a commitment to fostering diverse literary landscapes, Davisson curates a catalog that challenges conventions and sparks dialogue. Under his stewardship, Rebel Satori continues to be a beacon for groundbreaking literature that resonates with readers seeking fresh perspectives. His latest book, Puck You, reclaims folklore as a path for queer empowerment. His other works include Breeding Devils in Chaos, The Rise and Fall of Rajneeshpuram, and Starset Matrix, and the story Dim Star Descried in Matter Love, Queer Men, and the Precincts of Surrealism. Sven, welcome back to the show, and thank you for tripping me up with a word I didn't know.
Which word?
Rajneeshpuram.
Ah, this one. There's even a flag.
Ooh,
Ah,
beautiful. So, welcome back. How you been?
Good. Thank you for having me again.
Our pleasure. What have you been up to in the last year?
Writing a little bit, publishing a little bit.
Well, let's dive into some of that. Puck you. You're even wearing this swag.
Yeah. Available on our website, of course.
Beautiful.
Shameless
So if
plug.
I were to see you at a Pride event wearing that shirt with the book and the table in front of you, and I were to say, "Oh my God, what's this about?" What would you tell me?
The tagline I've been using is forging new myths from ancient ore. So it revisions ancient folklore as new living practice to sort of get queer people through this dark time that we're in.
Very nice. Can you give us a quick example of one?
What looks at pre-Christian Anglo-Saxon elves, which not the sci-fi elves, not your great grandmother's elves from the 19th century, but your sort of great 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 grandfather's elves.
So the mischievous spirits in the forest.
A queer magical race of elder gods in the forest. How about
Ooh, okay, let's dive into that. How would you turn that around for queer readers today?
that? I sort of use so a lot of Rebel Satori's stuff is about reclaiming, like we reclaimed William Burroughs in the queer canon. Um, our imprint Library of Homosexual Congress brings back books before they're lost completely to time. And my own work sort of revisions folklore for the modern era. So, just as Burroughs did with the space age, creating new myths for queer people, the book sort of gives modern tools out of ancient folklore.
And one of the things that I noticed as I was looking into it is it's also a bit of a manual for resistance, perhaps.
Resistance and sanity.
Love
Like one of
it.
the folklore tidbits so there's a tradition of black dogs in especially British folklore. And they're sort of harbingers of darkness or death. And so there's a whole chapter on the other black dog, but also transforming it into the black dog for depression. So how people can navigate depression and the black dog when it attacks them, or is seen in their path, I guess is a better way of putting it.
Right. And if I can spill a secret about the last couple pages of the book,
Yeah.
talking
No
about
need for spoiler alerts.
excellent. Can we show it to people? Because
Yeah.
and I think I have to ask you about the timeline of writing this because that's also important.
Correct. So after reading Devils in Chaos, which is like a tome would be the best description, it's like almost 600 pages. And after writing that, I knew what I wanted to write next as a follow up, but I was completely blocked in how to get started until November 6th, which I won't say what happened November 5th, but November 6th, woke up with the first few lines in my head and finished the manuscript by the end of the year. And it came out in March. So it was like boom, boom, boom.
All right,
And
let's.
the culmination, which you've alluded to, so it never mentions any particular modern politics in it. It does bring
Mhm.
Nazis in a little bit as a comparative, um, but it does end with a book of matches and a rewrite of "Remember, Remember" the 5th of November.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Um, so I know your writings also tend to include a lot of reclaiming male spirituality and such like that. But did you include rituals in this book this time?
Yes, yeah, there's certainly some queer rituals. A lot of them drawn. Well, there's actually a whole sort of rubric of practice in it,
Hmm.
and a little bit different from your other modern pagan traditions. Very queer, but it also does include some things lifted from Renaissance magical traditions where the fairies and the elves were sort of ever present. There's a lot of invocations of Oberon. Of course, with Puck in the name, I had to draw in that Elizabethan Shakespearean references. So there's a lot of Puck makes a lot of guest appearances from Shakespeare.
Love it. Is this one more nature oriented as opposed to Skins of the Devil oriented?
Yeah, I think that's a fair description. There's actually a chapter on healing the land
Oh,
because we sort of, and part of it was inspired by. So there's a traditional ritual to heal farmland and things. So I revision that as healing the land we live on because, of course, we all live on stolen land. I'm always reminded of that when I attend events at the Bureau of General Services Queer Division in New York, because they always open with an acknowledgement of the land, that the land they sit on was um, unceded land from Native Americans.
that's pretty cool. What else would I find in this book if I were to pick it up and start reading it?
Um, well, it sort of meanders. It's sort of creative nonfiction, so
Okay.
it's less. I intentionally did no footnotes in this one, whereas Reading Devils was, footnoted up the you know what.
Hmm.
So this is more creative revisioning of pre-Christian elves, or the Alpha in Anglo-Saxon terms. And there
Okay.
was some interesting things that happened to elves when um, Great Britain, England was re-Christianized. Because of course the Romans brought Christianity, but then it kind of dissipated, and there was the Anglo-Saxon and pagan kings, and then Christianity was reintroduced, and the elves shifted their perspective, or the perspective on the elves shifted.
So, can I ask about that shift? And then after you explain it historically, ask how you've applied it to gay men and our experiences.
So um, as Christianity, so the pre-Christian elves, um, and I always feel weird saying elves because that gives me this fantasy Tolkien vibe. But Tolkien, of course, drew a lot of his stuff from Anglo-Saxon folklore, but they were exclusively male, and they were often paired with very powerful women, seeresses and witches and warriors, sword-bearing women. But the elves are exclusively male and often described with female adjectives. So they weren't handsome; they were beautiful. So they were
Hmm.
sort of in this non-binary, in-between domain. And when Christianity came back into England, of course, males were you know less rife for sin. So the the bad gender was female, so the elves kind of shifted to more fairies and female, beguiling spirits that trapped men. And
Okay.
elves then started working to, elf shot, and they caused pain and deprivation.
Got it. So now how have you reworked it for the modern gay man?
So then, looking at sort of inspired by that pre-Christian influence, I reimagined the elves to give people something to hold on to mythologically. So as I said, it's creating new myths. So imagine this race of queer, powerful elder gods that people can tap into to give them support in this time.
Got it.
And that
Love it.
includes rituals for working with them and spells.
Love it. Is there anything else you want folks to know about it so they can run and pick it up?
It's a very accessible book. So even if you're not into modern paganism, the parts I've read in public get positive reception. And my beta reader friend that I use, Tom Cardamone, he got a lot out of it, even though he's not in the pagan domain. So it offers a
Awesome.
lot for different people.
Awesome. Baz, did you have any questions?
No, it's just I love that when you were describing that, I went, oh, so these would be the social circle that Endora would move in.
Right. And
Those would be
it's
our fanboys.
and it's written with gay men in mind, or non-binary men who
Right.
love men.
Uh-huh.
But I've had a lot of female readers who've reacted positively to it too.
I'm just thinking
Awesome.
from the perspective of, the re-envisioning of the elves. I'm like, okay, I could see Endora sitting down with these books.
Right, exactly.
Love it. So moving on to Rebel Satori and the imprints, are there any recent or upcoming releases that you want to share?
Well, we're releasing about 2 books a month. So you see the books we've released recently. One of them is from the Library of Homosexual Congress, our reclaiming imprint. We've
Hmm.
released Comfortable Corner, which was a really important book from the late 70s by Vincent Varga, um, on overcoming addiction and relationships. And that one's seen a tremendous new life in the last few months. There's a lot of
Very
gay
cool.
men's book groups on Facebook that have been reading it and applauding bringing it back. And of course, Vincent's in his 80s probably, and it's good to see his book have a second life. And we actually reprinted his husband's book, Time Remaining, James McCord, last year, and that also got a good reception. So it's nice to see both of them back in
That's awesome. Anything else?
print. What have we done recently? We had a new book, Julian's Debut, by Brian Alessandro, um, which imagines it's sort of a very contemporary literary fiction. The main character writes a piece which deals with family history and a lot of things that he shouldn't be saying, and that goes viral, and then he tries to turn it into a longer piece. So this work navigates through his talking about things that some people don't want him to talk about.
Right. All right. Any others?
Um, we have a new book of short stories, The Way Out is Through the Window, that just came out last week. We have Drought, a new book by Scott Alexander Hess, which came out earlier this month, which, again, it's a sort of romance, but goes back into a early 20th century historical time, back to a family farm, tobacco farm. Then we also had The English Tutor, which is right in the domain of romance, which is not something we usually publish, but it's a great book by Jeffrey Round that came out in March. It's our top selling title I can announce for this month. So I was just looking through the numbers.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. Well, where should people go to keep up with either your works or anything Rebel Satori and the imprints are working on?
Oh, of course, we have a website, rebelsatori.com, which features all our current titles, our backlist. Obviously, if you order directly from the publisher, both the publisher and the author get better support, so it keeps everything going.
Hmm.
We have a very not intrusive, but we have a monthly mailing list that gives news about our upcoming books and our past books and some author highlights and things.
Awesome. All right. Are you ready for our get to know you questions?
Sure.
He
On
says
the
that way.
fly, as it were.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, can you name a movie that was better than the book?
I can name a movie that's at least as good as the book. It may be better in certain ways, but the book is also good. So definitely one of my favorite movies is Kirel Fassbinder's reimagining of Jean Genet's book. I just think the movie is amazing, from the styling to, of course, Brad Davis to Jean Moreau. Um, it's just an incredible, incredible visual feat that he did,
Excellent. Totally
and
approve of that.
very erotic too. So
Yes.
it
Yeah.
ticks all the boxes.
Yes, it does. All right. Which fictional character would you most like to be friends with?
Probably one of William Burroughs' later characters, like Joe the Dead in the Western Lands. His last trilogy of books, the Cities of the Red Knight trilogy. Each one of his protagonists is a magical character that's exploring, domains that he sort of set the groundwork for in his earlier books. But I think they're his most realized books, even though, of course, his earlier books, Naked Lunch, etc., are probably the better known.
Excellent. Okay. Well, what's the most fascinating fact that you know?
Um, so the ones I've discovered recently is this whole notion of queer elves, which came from Elric Hall's, which I think it was his doctoral dissertation, Elves in Anglo-Saxon England, which was read as background, but then a complete surprise and really inspired Puck U.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Well, what was your favorite subject in school?
Um, Photography, I guess. I was a queer studies major with a photography bent, so maybe queer photography.
Oh, no. Okay. I'm down with it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before making a telephone call, do you rehearse what you're going to say?
Who talks on the telephone? um, I don't generally rehearse. The rare times I talk on the phone. I mean, I guess my day job, I talk on the phone all the time. So when I'm not at my day job, you know, text
Excellent.
is much better.
Yeah, yeah, and well, I think people rely on emails more than they try to do
Yes,
the
and it
actual phone
documents what
calls.
is being said.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I have been accused of adopting the annoying affectation of the young of eschewing talking on the phone. So,
All right. Well, what current events or causes are you most passionate about?
um, supporting queer men, especially in non-Christian traditions, or as I've been saying now, which may get me in trouble, post-Christian traditions.
Okay.
um, and certainly the cause of protecting, you know, freedom of everyone, and the how we survive the times we're going through, if we survive.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
book is a lot more positive than that, but we have gone through dark times in the past. So there is, it does take time to remember the people lost before us. So there's a tradition called the dumb supper or mute supper in Scotland, and it came over to Appalachia with the Scottish immigrants. And it's essentially a supper where there's no electricity, no lights, no phones, and you invite the dead to come eat with you, and you eat in silence with them. And the chapter on that in the book, I do go back to all the people unnamed that are with us as ancestors. The people who were lost to AIDS, the people who were lost to the Third Reich and the post Nazi Germany, when gay men were transferred from concentration camps to prison because they were still outlaws.
Paragraph 175. Yep.
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 Which is the name of our new podcast if it ever gets off the
Oh, okay. Excellent. Love to hear.
ground.
Breaking news.
From what is the tagline? From protest to prose.
Ah, love it. Love it.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
it'll be hosted by Brian Alessandro. So that's a work in progress.
Excellent. Excellent.
But I also bring into that there was a personal person I never knew, but growing up in Maine, Bangor, Maine wasn't that far from where I grew up. And in 1984, there was a gay man who was murdered in the town, and he was actually thrown off a bridge, Charlie Howard. And I remember walking through high school and having people yell at me, "I hope you know how to swim." And so I spent a time remembering him because he's not a name. He's not Matthew Shepard. He's not a name that a lot of people know about, but he's someone who is lost to us through violence. And to this day, some older people still refer to the bridge as the Chuckahomo Bridge. So I wanted to bring him back into the conversation a little bit.
Excellent. All right. If you could visit anywhere in the world, where would that be?
I don't know. I kind of like where I am right now, but
Nothing wrong with that. Good staycation. That works.
yeah, but going back to England, there are a lot of places that I went as a kid because I spent my summers in England with my mother, and going back to Cornwall, that's on the bucket list. Museum of Magic and Witchcraft is there still, and I went there as a kid, and I'd like to see how they've revisioned it now.
Love it. All right. Well, who, if anyone, was your first celebrity crush?
Oh, Rick Astley, probably. Sad to say. Then, not now. I had to think
That
for
little move he did. That was all it took.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Well, finally, what's your personal favorite recipe that you make, and are you willing to share it with us?
So I love to cook. That's my relaxation. And I can tell you my husband's favorite recipe that he makes whenever we have company is tagine chicken made with the name is escaping me, but the clay pot.
Excellent. Well, you made it through our list. Bravo.
Yeah.
Bravo. So, what's coming up next for you?
So I'm still writing. So I've been advised that my next ones, the last three were nonfiction, because there is also the Rajneeshpuram book I showed earlier, which I don't know if you know. Rajneeshpuram was the commune run by the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. So this is a segue to answer your question. But one of the things that fascinates me, this story was absolute top of the news in the early 80s, where these crazy followers of a guru took over a small town in Oregon. And it was everywhere. Newsweek, Nightline. It was one of those pieces that was just all over the place for years. And the war the small town had with this person, the xenophobia and racism. And when I talk to people who are my contemporaries who should remember that, no one remembers it, except for Wild Wild Country, which debuted on Netflix back in 2017, I think. So that gave it a sort of resurgence and a better articulated historical imagining of how the small town reacted to that. But it's interesting that so few remember it. So that's what that book sort of has a little bit of a reclamation of that. But given that the last three are nonfiction, to go back to your question, been told I have to write, the next has to be fiction. So I'm working on a novel which kind of imagines the people who read Puck You as if there's a group of people that have, still practice this living tradition. And there's a little bit of polyamory in it. Of course, it's on an island off the coast of Maine. So a little bit of sort of Elizabeth Hand mystique. She's a great fantasy sci-fi writer who lives on the coast of Maine and has written some great books in that setting. So a little bit of mystery.
Love it.
Okay, so like practical magic for the gay men.
Actually, someone this weekend, when I was describing it to them, said, "Oh, it's like the aunts in Practical Magic." Yes.
That's what I'm thinking.
So now you're the second person. And there is an older character, who mentors the wild boys who come to this sort of communal estate on a private island.
See, it's already there. You got your marketing right there.
Well,
and I know we've wrapped Pride Month, but are you doing any other events this summer that people could meet you at?
Yeah, so this past weekend, we're at the Bureau to do our third annual, which I'm very happy about. I love the Bureau for supporting us, and I love supporting them. Third annual Pride reading. So we had about a dozen Rebel Satori authors reading there. And that was their last Pride event of the season. And it was the Saturday right before Pride Day. So I got to watch the parade the next day.
Nice.
And in a couple of weeks, I'll be in Atlanta for Mystic South, which is a pagan gathering. And I'll be teaching about elves. I have a class called Puck in the City. Elves aren't just in the woods. They're in the city. They go where people go.
I love that. Well, where is the best place for people to keep up with updates, find dates and locations?
Rebel Satori has an event section. All of our events are there, my own and everyone else's. I try to, if my authors actually tell me when they're doing an event before the fact, it gets on there. I have an author newsletter and continually remind them to tell me when they're doing fabulous things.
You hear that, authors?
Yeah, get on that.
All right,
and it also has all our new releases and best-selling titles. And if we also discount all the best-selling titles of the month, we discount them 10% if they order through the website. And then we have a rewards program. So if you buy from us, you get rewards to use.
There you go. All the reasons.
And we love supporting our independent publishers. Thank you for being in the world.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a labor of love. Really.
Much like what we're doing here.
Yeah, aren't they all?
Or an obligation or a mission, or it depends on the day what I feel like.
I like mission.
Yeah. We have a very strong mission. So Tom, who curates with me the Library of Homosexual Congress, he's very big on he works in nonprofits. He's very big on defining mission. So we've worked really hard to hone our mission. And we actually just this year switched our tagline for the press to preserving our history one story at a time.
Excellent.
And each of the different imprints does it in different ways. So of course, Library of Homosexual Congress reclaims books from our past. Queer Mojo discovers the stories of our present, and Queer Space, which is our science fiction fantasy, imagines the stories of our future.
Love it.
That's awesome. Do you have any final words of wisdom?
Read books.
Yes.
I mean, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Print, ebook, whatever it is.
Especially Gen Alpha, are you listening? Read,
yes, exactly.
and comprehend.
I mean, there's no single storage device that is better than a book.
Yeah.
Especially hard copies. The more hard copies are out in the world, the more they'll last.
That is true.
That part. That part right there.
Because they don't disappear with clouds.
Or with technology. I mean, the FBI has a whole room of ancient technology like zip drives,
But yeah,
floppy disks, right?
that's like my husband. My husband says, "Why are you trusting it to the cloud? There could be a thunderstorm."
Mhm.
You know, take it all away.
And ebooks and audiobooks, even though you buy them, especially through a service, they disappear. Like I have an audiobook that I love that I wanted to go back to, and it's no longer in my devices because the licensing disappeared.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's gone. So now
Yeah.
I have to listen to it on Spotify.
It's the same way with music and movies. You know, if you get it from these streaming services, even if you buy it, if the license gets removed from the site, you don't have it anymore.
Yep. Whereas if you have a physical book, I mean, it stays with you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to loan to people.
Yeah,
You know, I encourage people to buy multiple copies and give them away.
yeah, absolutely.
that's
There's no better gift than a book, right?
Yeah.
Yes, agreed. All right, folks, we'd love to extend a huge thank you to Sven Davisson from Rebel Satori Press for coming and talking with us today and sharing this year's offerings. Sven, thank you so much.
No, and thank you for all you do. I mean, this is
It's
provide
our
a great,
mission.
important platform.
It's our mission.
Yeah.
All right, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. If you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. The show was produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.ropodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye-bye now.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.